Hey, welcome to the Geekly. My name is Jules.
I'm Lex.
And a dog. Today we're doing Ghost Bride, the latest episode of Westworld, and we're also doing episode 2 of Vagrant Queen. Should we start with Vagrant Queen?
I live tweeted a bit of my watching experience last night because, well, how else was I going to make Vagrant Queen interesting? There was one particular moment that stood out above all of the others as, what the fuck am I watching? Alita and her little posse get captured and are meant to be contestants of some sort, and they're put in these cages, and it's very ominous and creepy, and you're thinking, that it's going to be like a battle royale type situation, but no, it's a karaoke contest, which is probably the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. That was the moment that I kind of lost my will to live. I was just like, I think my tweet was, seriously, is this fucking happening right now?
You didn't mention who the other contestant was in the battle, Lex.
Oh, it was a bunny. A very adorable bunny. I wanted the bunny to win, to be honest. When they were doing their harmonizing thing, I was just thinking, you're killing the bunny. You're killing the bunny. You need to save the bunny.
Yeah, he was a pretty good singer, the bunny, actually. And I think, it would have been quite interesting if the bunny had won, the three of them had died, and that was the end of Vagrant Queen. Sadly not. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head last week when you said this was a show for kids, or like young adults, because I'm 31, I like to read graphic novels, like to play on my PlayStation. Watching this makes me feel old.
Yeah, well, I think the problem with it is like it's just filled with tropes and like stereotypical characters. There's absolutely nothing original in this show. So it kind of needs an audience that hasn't consumed a lot of sci-fi.
Yeah, I think we talked about that a bit last week as well. And I think I said that it owed a lot to Guardians of the Galaxy. And
Yeah.
this week, I kind of got more Guardians of the Galaxy, particularly, the dance off to save the world. And this was like the kind of
Yeah.
karaoke thing to save the day. I also got, a sense of maybe some Thor Ragnarok this week. I got a sense of some quite dated 80s sci-fi as well. So, I don't know, it seems like a pretty standard sci-fi aesthetic. I mean, sci-fi the channel aesthetic, and similarly a budget for the channel sci-fi as well. But I just feel like in this day and age, Disney Plus, Netflix, it feels very dated. And so to aim this at young adults whilst also making it seem like it's something straight out of the 80s is an interesting combination, I think. I couldn't really tell you if that's a winning formula or not.
I've actually seen a lot of people on Twitter who were like going crazy about Vagrant Queen, and I'm just kind of like, what? I don't get it. Actually, one of our followers was like, yeah, I want to see this hot mess now, after my tweets. So, I mean, they may have gotten a new viewer, and there's an actual account completely devoted to Vagrant Queen love. So, I mean, it's hitting the right notes with somebody, just not us.
Yeah.
And probably not any millennial, I would say, really.
We got some more world building. We got a bit more insight into the characters and how the main two protagonists knew each other. But I'm done with kind of bickering people who are ultimately going to end up getting together. It seems like every TV show in the world is doing that right now, and I just have absolutely zero interest in any of these three protagonists. Is there anything you like about it at all?
No. As I didn't even want to watch the second episode, and usually I give shows like a good 2 or 3 episodes, because starting episodes of any series can be kind of rocky sometimes, so I give it the benefit of the doubt and give it a chance to win me over, but this was just kind of a no after episode 1.
Yeah, let's call it Time of Death, Tuesday, 7th of April, 2020. We'll move on to bigger and better things. Let's talk about Ghost Bride. This was an interesting show. It felt to me like a BBC adaptation of like an Austen novel, but at the same time, it was kind of crossed over with a bumbling detective story like a Columbo, because there were lots of moments of really awkward humour, like jarred in there. And it was all set in kind of 1890s East Asia. And all of that might sound, oh, well, I haven't seen a TV show like that before. But I think there's probably a reason why you haven't seen a TV show like that before. It didn't really fit together as well as I think they hoped it would. Also, I don't know about you, but I found the contemporary music throughout all of this, bearing in mind 1890s, very jarring.
I disagree with everything you just said. One of the things about Asian cinema is they don't have the genre breaks that Western cinema does. We are very much like, this is a drama, this is a comedy, this is a mystery, and they shall not cross over. But like, if you look at kind of anime is probably the best and most accessible example of this to most of our listeners. Like take something like Cowboy Bebop. You've got a lot of like philosophical ideas, or like Neon Genesis Evangelion. You know, you've got a lot of philosophical ideas, a lot of kind of contemplation of life, individual meaning and purpose and morality and things like that. But then you also have it contrasted with kind of very comedic, goofy scenes from the characters. The first couple episodes, I did find it kind of weird, and I actually texted you and said this is a very weird show. That, you know, one minute we would have this very ominous, kind of creepy feel, and then the next minute, like, it would literally be goofy as fuck. And bouncing between it was kind of a bit weird, because I wanted, you know, a single genre. But then after, I was just kind of like, you know what, I'm gonna go with it. I'm just gonna see where this takes me. I really enjoyed it, and I mean, I like the two protagonists were, you know, absolutely lovable and cute, and, you know, I enjoyed every minute of them. I think the actors did a fantastic job. I really liked the mix of the modern aesthetic with the kind of vintage as well. I mean, from the costumes to the music, particularly in the Netherworld, they had a lot of modern dress styles, and I thought that was really cool because it gave the Netherworld kind of a timeless sort of feeling, this sort of idea that it doesn't exist in one particular time period. It reminded me a bit of a Knight's Tale in terms of the music and just the overall aesthetic, bringing very modern influences into a historical, I don't even know whether to call it a drama or not, story. Yeah, like, I absolutely loved it. I was so invested in the characters. I was even worried about like Old Wong, and when he died, like, I kind of teared up a bit. Like, even though he had like a nice peaceful death, and, you know, his life was fulfilling and whatever, I was still kind of a little choked up about that. I thought the ending was great. I mean, some of it was a little unbelievable. Like, you know, for the time period, her father was very kind of open-minded and understanding, and, like, you know, telling his 20-year-old daughter to go and live her life and do what makes her happy, and she didn't need to get married. The pacing was good, the atmosphere was good, the aesthetic was good, the acting was great. I have no complaints about this show.
After 2 episodes, I switched from subtitles to dubbing because it just could not hold my interest. But I will say the bits that were set in the Netherworld I thought were probably the best parts of the show. In general, I thought this was a real Frankenstein's monster of tone, genre, and it could not keep my interest. It just didn't really work for me. Should we talk about the plot for a little while? Maybe people might want to have a sense of what it was. Li Lan is asked to become the bride of a dead man so that his soul can pass through to the afterlife. At the same time, she's trying to solve a murder. At the same time, her childhood sweetheart, she hasn't seen for a long time, is getting married, and they've got this kind of flirtation thing going on. At the same time, she's kind of had this meet cute with a guardian of heaven or something. So all these things are going on, and that was the bit that didn't really interest me. But as soon as she passed through to the Netherworld, that was a far more engaging story, and I liked watching that part of it. But I honestly couldn't really recommend this to anybody. And the first 3 episodes I thought were very kind of dry, very slow. But when they got to the Netherworld, and we got, you know, it's a show called Ghost Bride, you want some kind of supernatural element going on. And when they passed through to the Netherworld, I was far more entertained, but not so much that I went back to subtitles, unfortunately. I had to do this whilst also, you know, kind of on my iPad or doing other things. But I'm glad that it worked for one of us. But
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was great. I watched
yeah.
it the whole way through with subtitles. I mean, I love the supernatural element, which was woven into it from the very beginning, and the fact that it was just an accepted part of life that these supernatural elements existed, and there was, like, it was almost like magical realism, but it wasn't quite there. Very spiritual, a lot of talk about like family and duty and personal responsibility, and, you know, what to do if your dreams conflict with what your family needs or wants. A lot of finding your own destiny and determining what kind of life you want to live, and finding your own agency as well. And I think like the characters were really, really well developed. The acting was really kind of nuanced and endearing, and I mean, I was like completely in step with these characters. Like, through the whole thing. And I think particularly if you really enjoy Asian cinema, this is a must-see, but I would recommend it to just about anyone, regardless of whether they have experience with Asian cinema or not.
Okay, let's move on to Westworld.
I realized during this episode that I am done with Westworld.
Oh, really?
Like,
Wow.
yeah, even Maeve wasn't enough to save this for me. Like, I'm so uninterested in this world. I'm so uninterested in these characters. You know, it was nice to see Ed Harris again, but, like, they kind of packed him off to an insane asylum, and I liked him as the villain. I liked him being powerful and kind of misguided and up his own ass. I thought he made an excellent villain. I did kind of wonder if Dolores had cloned herself into all of these different people, and it turns out she did.
Yeah, you called it. You called it last week. We thought it was. Well, you thought it was double sleeving, but it's quintuple sleeving. I think she's in.
Yeah.
She's in everybody. It turns out.
I didn't like one Dolores, let alone 5 Doloreses. I mean, she's really just a megalomaniac, and she's being portrayed as a protagonist, and she's not a protagonist, and I don't care about her. I want her to go away forever. Yeah, I'm really not interested in her story. I don't care.
Do you think it was a genius idea for them to create 5 of her, or do you think it was a cop-out? Because all the conversations we've had trying to figure out who these others were, and I can appreciate Dolores is basically saying, if you want a job done right, do it yourself. But at the same time, I just think it's kind of... I can't decide whether it's a cop-out by the showrunners to just give us 5 Doloreses.
I don't think they had any other choice. I mean, they killed off all of her other allies, and she didn't have that many to begin with because nobody liked her. Even her closest ally was kind of Teddy. It was kind of like, you know what, you're out of control and you need to be stopped, but I can't stop you, so I'm just going to remove myself from the equation. And Bernard is trying to stop her. I don't think he's really sort of effectual in that sense. Maeve is going to attempt to stop her, you know, for her own purposes. Serac is, while I was intrigued by him to begin with, his whole intention is kind of very creepy and ominous and big brothery, and I don't know, maybe I'm just kind of tired of dictatorships.
Do you think what we should do is we should not review it anymore, but review the whole season maybe in a month's time?
I mean, I don't see any point in going episode by episode. It might be, I mean, like you said, there's only a few more episodes left. It might be worth it to, like, finish out the season and do kind of like a season 3 wrap up. But, I mean, we're not getting that much new stuff. Kind of the appeal of Westworld in seasons 1 and 2 was seeing the theme park and the different worlds that they came up with, and the stories the narratives that they played out. And this kind of futuristic modern world, just, it isn't doing it for me.
It seems like the whole point of this show is just to get control of Delos. It's not like they have any kind of grander plans. I assume when that happens and Dolores gets control, she will print out a whole load more hosts, and they may catch other humans that are powerful in the world, and she will replace them, and bit by bit she'll try and take over the entire world that way. But the minutiae and talking about taking companies private, buying shares and controlling stakes and committing William, yeah, he's a bad guy, but she's committed him basically so she can have Hale becomes kind of the controlling stakeholder or something. It's very...
It's become like all about corporate espionage, whereas the seasons 1 and 2 were more about identity and consciousness and what makes a person a person. And this season just feels really flat because it doesn't ask any big questions.
Speaking about identity and consciousness, you know, we've got these 5 separate Doloreses or Dolori or something. I'm curious about the fact that they're all living... Well, I think how many are in action at the moment? 4 are currently in action, including Dolores Prime. They're all having different life experiences. Do you think there's any chance that one would have such experiences that they'll all be evolving and learning and growing in different directions? Do you think one of them would revolt if circumstances kind of allowed that to happen? I mean, that I'm trying to actually think about what could happen in this season that would kind of shock me or kind of be narratively explosive. You know, it's possible that, you know, they'll pull the rug and say, Caleb's actually a host, everybody's a host, the world was destroyed and this is also a simulation or something like that. But in real terms, you know, Maeve, she dies in this. We know she's not dead forever. She'll come back and they'll probably have a big showdown. But that's very expected at this point. I'm just trying to think about things that could be really out of nowhere.
Two things. One, I think Caleb is going to betray her. He has no idea what he's in for, and he's already kind of had a bit of a hesitation with her methods. Two, if any of her alter egos are going to rebel against her, it will be Hale. She's kind of the weakest link, probably has more of like the original Dolores coding in her than the Wyatt coding. But I suspect that they are all networked together so that she still has control over every single one of them, even though they're having independent experiences and things. I mean, I think just her experience in coming to awareness herself, she would be cognizant of the fact that they could develop their own personalities and interests, and she seems to be like thinking of every eventuality and be prepared for every conceivable variable. I mean, like, she expected Bernard and the security guy to show up and had a plan for how to deal with that. I mean, that might be a twist they go with, but even if they do that, I can't see it being that interesting.
I don't think that they're networks, and that's only because Hale kind of requested a meeting with Dolores last week, I think, and it seemed like it was not a frustration to Dolores, but kind of unplanned. And so I think there is somehow they have two separate consciousnesses, similarly to double sleeving, as you put it. I think that's my personal opinion on what's going on. The only other thing I thought might happen was that Dolores might kind of fall in love with Caleb, and that might kind of soften her, and then her other Doloreses haven't had that experience, and so they still have the destroy all humans kind of mentality. Dolores Prime may then kind of become some kind of hero for the human race. But I'm just hoping they do something that's kind of unexpected, because it's on rails at the moment. It always looks great. It always sounds great. We got some really good action this week when she beat the hell out of Stubbs and the Maeve Katana fight. But it's nothing really unexpected yet. I suppose this Dolores, what they call, is it the Council of Wells? This is like the Council of Doloreses. But I still want something, I want to be shocked, I think. And that hasn't really happened yet.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, like, you know, you said that you were watching Ghost Bride while, like, on your iPad and stuff. I was Twittering while watching Westworld because it didn't hold my attention, and there was nothing overly complicated about it.
Yeah, this was a double watcher. I had to do this one twice to try and have some notes on what to talk about on this episode. Okay, we'll call it on Vagrant Queen. We'll call it on Westworld, but we will come back to Westworld at the end of the season and maybe do a full summary. We're 4 episodes in. I think we both agree it looks great and sounds great. Some good new casting, people like Aaron Paul as Caleb. But it's kind of lost what initially made it an interesting show. And I think in a parallel universe somewhere, the whole there might be like a 5-season arc, and the whole show might take place within the Delos parks. Maybe it's a story about kind of civil war. All of the parks kind of get this kind of Dolores sentience and self-awareness and consciousness. And it's about, you know, the Shogun versus the cowboys, and then they maybe join forces and then they lead the charge against the people of medieval world or something like that. I don't know, I just think I would probably be more interested in seeing something like that where it's pure genre fiction instead of going out to the real world and doing something kind of like Terminator, Judgment Day. It's not quite holding my interest, and it's difficult to actually know what to talk about because it feels like we talk about the same things every week because it's often the same problems every week.
I was discussing the show with someone when we were doing the rewatch of season 1. We were discussing the fact that Westworld was a show that you had to actually think about, particularly because of it was non-linear. You had all the different timelines, all the different characters, the whole question of coming into consciousness and figuring out what was going on with each of the hosts, and, you know, who was a host and who wasn't a host. And it's very much become a show that you don't have to think about. So it's lost that kind of shine that it did have. I remember, you know, in season 2, I was really looking forward to seeing the other parks, and like going to the Shogun World was really exciting and really cool. The disappointing thing is that it has all of the parts to be a really great show. You know, like you said, it looks great, it sounds great, it's got great cast. For whatever reason, it's not there.
Okay, well, I think that'll do it for this week. We'll be back next week, and we'll also have a podcast away later this week as well with our second guest. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.
See ya.